The White House says US President Joe Biden will use his remaining time in office to make the case for continued support for Ukraine. Biden will meet with President-elect Donald Trump later this week. Our North America correspondent Barbara Miller is in Washington, D.C. Barbara, loved your work last week. What a busy week you had, but it never stops. What do we know about this meeting?
Yeah, it never stops, but it's interesting, isn't it? I don't think many of us predicted that the result would be so definitive, that there would be no results, essentially, that would be being contested in this post-election period. And because there's no contest, the transition process is really getting underway quickly. And there will be that meeting, as you say, this week between President Biden and Donald Trump in the White House. That's midweek local time. Now, obviously, Donald Trump doesn't need a tour of the White House. It's only a few years since he was there himself for his first term. So the two men likely to discuss the transition process. The Biden administration really keen to say, oh, we're going to ensure that it all goes smoothly, unlike the subtext being unlike in 2020. And they're going to discuss also domestic and foreign policy issues we'd expect, including Ukraine. And we heard today from Jake Sullivan, the president's national security advisor, and the Biden administration is really concerned that Donald Trump, who campaigned on a platform of not funding overseas conflicts and of claiming that he could solve the Ukraine conflict in a day, that he might very quickly stop military aid to Ukraine or restrict it. And what the Biden administration's concern is that weakens a negotiating position from Ukraine if indeed Russia and Ukraine are to come together to try and negotiate an end to the conflict. Let's just hear a little of what Jake Sullivan told CBS today, saying that President Biden will use his remaining time to really press the case that the U.S. needs to keep supporting Ukraine.
Of course, President Biden will have the opportunity over the next 70 days to make the case to the Congress and to the incoming administration that the United States should not walk away from Ukraine, that walking away from Ukraine means more instability in Europe. And ultimately, as the Japanese prime minister said, if we walk away from Ukraine in Europe, the question about America's commitment to our allies in Asia will grow.
Meanwhile, Barbara, the soul searching in the Democratic Party continues.
That's right. Bernie Sanders, the Vermont senator, one-time presidential hopeful himself, has been one of the most vocal people on this front. He also hit the Sunday talk shows today. And his argument, as we saw in a statement from him a few days ago, is that the party abandoned the working class and that the working class in America is very angry because of the wealth disparity. Just a few people so wealthy at the top of the tree and many people living paycheck to paycheck. Let's listen to Bernie Sanders now. This is on CNN, talking about why he thinks Donald Trump's argument succeeded on that front.
He said, I know you're angry, and the reason is that zillions of illegal immigrants are coming over and they're eating your cats and dogs and everything else. That's the reason. Well, obviously, that is not the reason. The reason is, in my view, that we have an unprecedented level of corporate greed today, more income and wealth inequality, and people on top want it all.
Now, of course, questions being asked around whether things might have been different if Joe Biden had stood aside earlier, if there had been a competitive process for the person to succeed him, and whether Kamala Harris ran a good campaign. And this is, of course, all this jostling that we're going to see about the future direction of the Democratic Party and ultimately who might contend the primary elections 4 years from now, because of course there's a whole bunch of names being thrown around already, and although we've just had this election, the Democratic Party already looking to 2028, what's the direction of its campaign and who might emerge on top there to take on whoever the Republicans put up 4 years from now.